Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ELKR Rotary Club. It is a beautiful Monday out there, and but it's even more beautiful in here. It's great. Glad to have so many folks in attendance today. Bright, smiley faces as we approach spring. Bill Burton, will you come up and give us some thoughtful words?
That's awesome. Often an oxymoron. Bill Burton will give you thoughtful words. Welcome. Welcome to March. Please join me in a moment of reflection. Lord, it is good to recognize how different we are. Our talents, our dreams, our backgrounds, our occupations. And it's good to know that when you created each of us, you broke the mold. No one is exactly like any one of us. Even our thumbprint and our voice track tell us how unique we are. Yet we thank you that we can take these differences and mobilize them for the good of Rotary, our community, and our world. In our differences, we can think the same thoughts and move together toward that common goal. Bless us as we meet together. Thank you for our individuality and also for our common bond of Rotary. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Andrew Harmon greeted you and checked you in as you came in. Andrew, will you come and introduce our guests?
Good afternoon. We've got a couple of guests with us today. Larry Knight as a guest.
My friend is retired neurologist and member, Dr. Patrick Russell.
Ashley Bowen as a guest.
So I have my coworker with me, financial counselor Brianna Welch.
Excellent, thank you, Andrew. Welcome, Dr. Russell. How's the lunch?
Very good.
Look good, good. And Brianna, great to have you here as well. Thanks for coming. Okay. All right, just a real quick, I always like to introduce folks online. Let's do a real quick gallery view here. We've got 21 people online. Let's spin this around here. Do a quick pan over there. There's Brett, Bill, our guest there. Mo, that's a nice color blue. I like that. Everybody give a wave. Everybody get a wave. Fantastic. If you're online, show us your face. Or I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Be careful. Make sure everyone's appropriate. I guess that's a smart thing to do. Okay, just a few announcements. If you have announcements, please come on up. And while that's happening, just a reminder that our donations committee, chaired by Bill Burton, this is a immediate past president role. Someone told me I'm next. I think that's a good thing. So Bill, thanks for doing that. And just a reminder to everyone online, you can find that on the home page. It is on, if you're looking on your PC, it's on the lower right-hand side. It's called Downloads. And if you're looking on your phone, just scroll down under Downloads and you can actually download that. share it with not-for-profits out there. The deadline is April 1st, which is a Friday. So if they get it to us by end of day via email, they'll be in consideration for that, for those donations and those grants. We have had a little democratic engagement. Thank you all. So many of you, and I'm sure there's some who haven't, but weigh in on the buffet. There are some challenges with this, and we're going to talk about that as a board on Friday. But if you haven't taken that, I'll send that back out maybe this afternoon so you can go and link to it. But give us your thoughts. It just takes a minute, but I'd appreciate it. And that'll help us in terms of where we want to go with that as a board and as a club. And I hope everyone's enjoying lunch today. Board meeting is Friday. I mentioned that, March 11th at ELKR Health and Aquatics, 7 o'clock. Bring your own coffee. Anything else you'd like? I think now that masks are actually optional at Beacon Health and Aquatics. So use your best judgment and your comfort level there. May 20th and 21st is the district conference at Notre Dame. Registration, I don't know. I've been watching the calendar and the district website. Has anyone seen that up already? I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not sure that registration is actually available. But if anyone would like to join me at the district conference, it's a short drive that makes it kind of nice, and that'll be a way for our club to get engaged. Let's see. Club Runner online access. Just a reminder again, if you are having trouble accessing Club Runner, let me know. I'd be happy to help you. We can either do it over Zoom. I'm happy to just show you on my computer. If anyone here needs it, I can show you right here on this laptop before we leave today. Just let me know. It's a piece of cake. But I want to make sure you're able to do it. Sometimes it's just that first step of getting that done. The upcoming schedule, next week, we've got Michael Desch, professor of political science at Notre Dame, is going to be talking to us about Ukraine and Russia, which Bill, very timely, obviously, on this one. It should be interesting to hear Dr. Desch, am I saying it right? Desch. And March 21st, this is important. If you want to go to the Jack Boyd Smith car collection, the JBS collection, we're going there to his location again. I know some of you were there. We're going to go to that same location up at the airport, but we're going to hear Jack talk about gasketing instead of the car collection. But of course, the cars will be another, star of the show. So you'll be able to come a little early. We'll have more information. What we want you to do, though, is we want you to RSVP. So I'm going to share my screen here really quick. So check this out, everybody. It's pretty easy. You just go to the upcoming meetings and you click on Jack Smith, CEO Gasket Tape on March 21st. You go to this listing where it's got a picture there of Jack's office. And then midway down, you've got to click here to RSVP. Please help us to know how many lunches to bring. And if you would like a vegetarian lunch, please indicate so. So you click on that, it goes to this Google form, and Julie's probably thinking, Eric, why didn't you use Club Runner? You could have used Club Runner. Now that she figured out how to do it, which is really cool. But anyway, yeah, piece of cake. You put in your email, it might populate for you if you're logged in, and your last name, first name, and then yes, I'll be there. And if you want more than one, you can do this for multiple people. Just if you want to bring a guest, and I know this is one that we've had several people who've asked, and just let us know if you are a meatitarian or a vegetarian. That is all there is to that. But this will help us, really help us in terms of the things that we need to rent for tables and chairs, what we need to have set up, and then help us with keeping food costs and waste low by letting us know who's going to be there. March 28th, Jeff New. Some of you might know him. Some of you might have heard of him. Jeff New. They're celebrating their 75th anniversary of Mid-States or Mid-City Supply. Mid-City Supply. Jeff, I hope you're not out there. Saw that, heard that. And morning division this week, I believe there is a service project, and Bob might be online, but there's a service project if you want to come and hang out at ELKR Health and Aquatics Thursday morning at 7 o'clock. You can help them with that and go there and help out. Are there any other announcements? Julie? Julie, you're eating. I'll mention it if you'll remind me of the date. May 15th. Julie's got a really cool opportunity for us at the South Bend Cubs. We're going to be on the home run porch, and there's going to be a buffet. It's an all-you-can-eat sort of deal. You go out there, you sit, you eat, you watch some baseball, you buy a beer, take a walk around. $35. You can do it right online. We'll send out some links to that. Julie already sent, I think, a link on Friday. And we'll send that out again, though. We've got lots of time. And already, I think you said there's upwards of 30 people already, 25 to 30. So sign up, bring your families. It's one of those social sort of things. And if you have, whether you've been to a South Bend Cubs game or not, they're always a lot of fun. And this one, and I want to share that it is in the home run porch. So there could be home runs coming our way. Home runs are cool, but they also hurt if you're not paying attention. So you hear that crack of the bat, either turn around and cover your head or keep an eye on the ball, one way or the other. So you'll see more on that, but that'll be a lot of fun. Julie, thanks for organizing, and thanks for using Club Runner to get that going. It was really easy. I paid online. So you have to pay online to be registered. And this is something that's going to make bookkeeping a lot more friendly for our good treasurer, Jim Story. Is that right? This makes it easier, right? Registering online? Yes, good. Excellent. Okay. Every week we raise a little money to give away at the donations committee. And we've got a sergeant that needs no introduction today.
Thank you, Eric. And Bill Reed here with the greatest Rotary Club in Northern Indiana. I want to wish you all a happy March. In March, we have several traditions in my family. Since my mother was a Fitzpatrick, we celebrate St. Patrick's Day. We do it with an Irish meal, co-cannon, and since I've become an adult, we also have a pint of Guinness to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. We also have a tradition in our family in March that we make our yearly resolutions on March 4th as we march forth to accomplish great things in the coming year. For my March 4th goals, I was going to quit all my bad habits from last year, but then I remembered nobody likes a quitter. If you're like me and most people, whether you make resolutions on March 4th or on New Year's, we oftentimes fail to fulfill our dreams, our aspirations, our hopes for a better and a brighter tomorrow. For example, in 1791, during the Austro-Turkish War, an Austrian general dreamed of bringing an end to the 4-year war between the Austrian and Ottoman empires. The Austrians set out with a large force to try and entrap and defeat the Ottoman army at Karamzes. As they prepared for battle the next day, they were instructed to get a good night's sleep. Unfortunately, the army discovered a bunch of gypsies nearby who were brewing and selling beer. Feeling a bit thirsty after a long, hard day, the Austrian army began drinking rather than following orders and sleeping. Sadly, the gypsies eventually ran out of beer late in the evening. This led to some fighting between some Austrian soldiers who were very drunk and other Austrian soldiers that wanted to be more drunk and wanted more beer, but now the beer was gone. As the fight escalated, someone fired a rifle. As that shot was fired, the Austrians feared that they were being attacked by their enemies, the Ottomans. So they began wildly firing. When the gunfire finally ceased, they had killed or wounded the entire Austrian army, forcing them to retreat and ultimately lose the war. So if you've ever made a mistake, maybe because you've drunken too much or you didn't follow orders or take advice from your spouse or partner, then put in a buck.
I don't think you didn't raise much money on that.
You've never made a mistake, Bill? So, going on, in the early 1960s, Decca Records began planning for their future expansion and how they were going to be a powerhouse in the music industry. Their management team dreamed and worked on a strategic plan that they were sure would lead to great success. And as they evaluated the music landscape, they determined that guitar groups were not a form of music that people would want to purchase. That meant that in 1962, when a guitar troupe named the Beatles auditioned, they politely told them they saw no future in their music and would not sign them up. Fortunately for the lads from Liverpool and the rest of the world, EMI Records, they were sure the guitar groups had a future and they signed them up. If you've ever regretted a missed opportunity, like investing in Apple or Bitcoin, not returning a call, not hanging on to a now classic car, or not going on a second date, or some other missed opportunity, then put in a buck. Have you ever dreamed of helping or relieving people's suffering? Has this ever been a goal for you? In 2010, urologist and avid golfer, Dr. Lloyd Seeskin, dreamed of helping men find a discreet way to alleviate the suffering of full bladders on the golf course. Dr. Seeskin developed and he sold the Euro Club. True product, you can find this online. A hollow golf club that allows a golf player to urinate discreetly into a hollow plastic golf club with a fabric privacy golf towel shield that has observers thinking that users are just taking a practice swing. This is true.
I'm sorry.
So if you've ever desired to help people, even if your help has missed the mark, like when I tried to help my wife declutter her closet by reducing her shoe collection, which was a bad idea. If you've ever tried to help or alleviate suffering, just like Dr. Seeskin has, then put in a buck. In the late 1950s, movies executives dreamed of new ways to get people in theaters and for ways of increasing ticket prices. In 1960, they thought they had found a surefire way to increase prices and attendance. Forget 3D movies where you had to wear those funny red and green glasses. Instead, what audiences really wanted was to smell a movie. So in 1960, movie companies invested in smell-o-vision, an elaborate system that allowed a film reel to trigger the release of bottled scents that were piped to the audience in sync with pivotal moments in the movie. The only film to make use of smell-o-vision was 1960's Scent of Mystery, written specifically with that gimmick in mind. Ads for the film proclaimed, first they moved, 1895. Then they talked, 1927. Now they smell. Unfortunately, the results stank, as many smells didn't really smell, or the scents got mixed together like pipe tobacco and gasoline, creating unpleasant odors. If you've ever smelled something unpleasant, or smelled unpleasant yourself, or released an unpleasant smell, then put in a buck. Walkers is a UK-based snack company that implemented a social media campaign where customers submitted selfies for an opportunity to win tickets to a major sporting event. These selfies were uploaded digitally to Walkers, where the selfies instantly appeared on online and digital billboard ads. And these ads proclaimed your love for Walker snacks. Unfortunately, the site was not monitored by real people, only computer algorithms. The Brits, they have a bit of humor, so they decided to have a bit of fun, and so they uploaded pictures of dictators, serial killers, and even body parts. The end result of Walker's failure to have real people audit the pictures before they were instantly posted for the world to see that this loves Walkers created a PR nightmare for the company. If you've ever posted something online that you later regretted, please put in a buck. Finally, I'm devastated that I won't be able to celebrate my birthday this March. It's in October. If you haven't maxed out, please do so.
Excellent, thanks, Bill. And I wanted to make sure, I don't think Bill saw this comment from Deb Oza online. I assume she was referring to the golf tool, that it is available for both genders, right? Of course. That seems like a DEI sort of thing, right? That's inclusive. Okay, one thing, there was a question, and I posted it on the chat online, and I'll send this out. We would be remiss to not mention Ukraine, and I don't know about you, but I have actually wondered what are some good channels to be able to donate that, and it might not be the guy that I saw on the street who said, put $5 in my can and it'll go to Ukraine. So I thought that might be a little sketchy. So it turns out, and thanks to Andy and Howard, they mentioned that there is in fact a disaster response fund that Rotary has created through the Rotary Foundation that is a direct channel. So if you, like I, were looking for something that I would trust to be a true, this money is going to where it needs to get to, that's the one. So I'll send that out via email. And I'm looking at it right now online. They're also making, just so you're aware too, they're also making grants available for all the Rotary clubs that are in that region who may border Ukraine. Certainly there are quite a few, and they're able to get $50,000 disaster response fund grants. There's also the district is able to transfer unallocated district designated funds to support disaster response. But for any person, all of us Rotarians and anyone else, if you want to send that to anyone else too, they can donate to the Rotary Foundation, and it's going to get there to that disaster response fund. So thank you, Bill, for the good information about March. My son's birthday is March 17th. He always likes to claim that he has no problem with luck or having a party on his day, and I would agree with him. Until he's 21, it gets a little weird when everyone's pouring beer. So we'll get there. Excellent. Bill Burton, would you like to come introduce our guest, please?
Well, I persuaded our speaker to join us today on the premise that this was a very elegant class, high quality, prestigious group. Thanks, Bill.
Just following your lead.
Brett graduated his undergraduate business degree and his MBA from the University of Notre Dame, so a little west of here. Prior to joining First Source, he was with Bear Stearns in Japan, engaged in foreign securities operations, government securities trading, and then joined First Source initially in 1999 as a corporate trainee. I became a trust investment analyst. I have appreciated working with Brett as I need his guidance occasionally on CD rates and that sort of thing. He became chief investment officer and was that for many years, and has recently been promoted to our chief financial officer and treasurer for First Source Corporation. So Brett, thank you so much for joining us today. Please welcome Brett Bauer.
Hi, well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I suppose. Wow, that was a hard act to follow with the Hollow Golf Club story. I do want to say, though, how excited and honored I am to be able to present to you today. And just being here in person really just makes it that much better. I was going to say that you're just looking back or looking at everybody and seeing your faces and being here in person is just fantastic for me, especially because this is the first time I'm being able to present in a group without masks in probably the last 2 years. So this is just really fantastic for me, for that theme. And so, and I did want to just kind of give a glimpse of why, you know, we at the bank are so invested in looking at the economy and interest rates. And so, part of my responsibilities at the bank are to manage our interest rate risk of the bank. And so basically what we're trying to figure out is how the movements in interest rates affect our earnings. And so we've published this analysis in our annual report. And what we're trying to show here is different scenarios with interest rates. So if interest rates go up, how does that impact our earnings? If interest rates go down, how does that impact our earnings? And we have this over a couple of different time horizons here. But you can just see that over a longer period of time, for 2 years, for example, if interest rates go up 200 basis points or 2 percentage points, it impacts our earnings to the positive by almost 7%. Conversely, though, if interest rates go down, and this would be 100 basis points immediately, you can see we have a very negative impact to the bank of around just over 2%. So this is why we're so invested in looking at the economy and looking at interest rates. And this is why we publish this information too, so that we can talk about it with you as well. I guess, you know, so that's just a little bit of background on why today's topic is so important to us. But you know, Bill and I were just talking right before this, and it's just such a good time to be able to get in front of you and talk about this topic, just because there's so many things going on right now. And so I thought we could just touch on some of the high level topics that we're monitoring at the bank. And so these are the topics that I thought we could just kind of dig into here a little bit today. And so the first one, of course, is the overall economy. How are we doing, and the expectations for the near future? And then we have the labor market. So where are we at with people getting back to work? And you know, since the pandemic, and then what has happened, you know, from that period till now. And then another hot topic, of course, is inflation, which we've all been hearing about. And then we have geopolitical risk. And so, of course, this risk is increasing, as we just talked about with the Russia-Ukraine issue that we're seeing. And then lastly, we have the Fed, the Federal Open Market Committee, and we want to see how are they interpreting all of this that's happening right now. And then I always relate everything back to interest rates, because as we just saw, it really impacts the bank. And so these are some of the things I thought we could just dig into. And I will just say that I'll tell you up front that I am an analyst at heart. So I'm going to warn you that I have a lot of graphs that I'll be going through. And I know there are a lot of jokes out there about analysts and economists. And most of them are pretty funny, because there's always a grain of truth in in them. So recently, I just heard one. So I feel like Mondays are good for bad jokes, so I'm going to start mine. So what happens when you put 10 economists in the room? You get 11 different opinions. So you'll see part of that into my presentation here as well. So here's another one. So three economists went target shooting. The first one missed a yard to the left. The second one missed a yard to the right. The third one came up and saw both of those and said, "We got bullseye." Sorry, I'm going to stop right there. Honestly, though, you'll definitely see some of those, I guess, those underlying dynamics in the presentation here today. So starting with the economy, this graph is showing the measurement of our economic output on a quarterly basis, and I took this back 10 years. And you can see that steady growth up until we hit the pandemic. And then we had that immediate drop from the shutdowns, and that was early 2020. And then we bounced back fairly quickly. And just a quick fact, we actually had the shortest recession on recent record at that time, and it lasted for about 2 months. And technically it was from February 2020 till April of 2020. And so going back to that time period, April of 2020, when everybody was scrambling, trying to figure out what's going to happen, the big discussion at that time was, what type of recovery are we going to have? Is it going to be a V-shaped recovery? Is it going to be a W? Is it going to be an L-shaped recovery? So I guess I'm not sure exactly what you call this. I would probably say it's more of like a elongated V-shaped recovery. But I think really the point here on this graph that I just wanted to point out was that we are getting close to being back on the pre-pandemic trend. And you can see that trend line is going back 10 years. And so, and it has taken us 2 years to get there, but we're almost there. And I would classify really this as we're doing pretty well at this point. So moving on, this is another look at the numbers in the graph that we just looked at. And so every quarter, the Bureau of Economic Analysis publishes their calculation on the economy, and it gets reported as an annualized quarterly increase. And that's what this is. So if you're hearing about, in the Wall Street Journal or news reports about what the economy is doing, it's usually this number that they're reporting. So those big drops that you can see in the first quarter 2020 and then the second quarter 2020, those represent the bottom of that V that we just looked at. And we had our record drop there in the second quarter of 2020, where the economy actually crashed by 31.2% on an annualized basis. The good news is that we rebounded very quickly, as we saw. And since then, outside of that one large increase, if you just average the blue bars there up until the orange, that averages to 5.3%. And so if you look back prior to the pandemic, prior to those negative numbers, and you average those numbers, the normal growth rate before the pandemic was about 2.5%. So we have been growing above, I would say, the normal. But the question is, how long is that going to continue? So the orange bars there represent what economists in the marketplace are forecasting. And you can see out to fourth quarter of 2022, the end of this year, economists are really projecting that we are going to return back to that normal growth rate. And so I think what they're looking at is really the consumers, who make up 70% of our GDP. And I think the expectation is that the consumer is going to start slowing down their consumption to some extent, or moderating their consumption to some extent. And there are signs that they're starting to do this. So one of the things that we keep hearing about is household debt is starting to rise, and it's above the pre-pandemic levels that we've seen. So that's one thing. Another thing that I've heard people cite is that consumer deposits are starting to decrease. So people are starting to use their deposits. We at the bank, we have not noticed that trend yet, but it's something that we're watching very closely. And then the consumer confidence levels, they measure these on a monthly basis. Those are actually going down to almost recession levels that we had back in 2006. And so given all of those, I think that's why the economists are thinking that the consumer will probably start slowing down at some point here soon. Now, with all that said, no one is projecting a large decrease in consumer spending. No one's projecting a recession at this point. And it's because there's an offset to that slowdown. And that offset is a very, very strong labor market. And so that's what I have up here to represent that. And this is the US unemployment rate. And I took this back to September of 2018. But you can see that we spiked up to 14.7% unemployment, back right when the pandemic hit. And since then, we've had a really good trend downwards. The most recent number that we had was in February, and this was at 3.8%. Prior to the pandemic, you can see in February of 2020, we hit an all-time low of 3.5%. So we're very close. Still a little bit more to go, but we're very close. The other thing to note too is projections going forward. I've listed here the Fed projections at 3.5%. The Fed is thinking that we are going to get back to those low levels. And this aligns with what economists are thinking as well. So I think, again, this is very strong numbers, and this is what the Fed is looking at. And they are reiterating that it's a strong labor market. But if you dig into the numbers, we have seen a change in the underlying dynamics. And so the unemployment rate is based off the labor force. And the labor force is basically people that are working or people that are looking for work. So you have to actively be looking for work to be counted in that labor force. And that's what's in the unemployment number. And so if you strip out the unemployment number, though, you're just looking at the labor force, that's where it gets a little bit interesting. And that's what this graph here represents. So this is the labor force participation rate. And so this is showing, again, how many people are working and looking for work compared to the working age population. And there's just one big takeaway that I wanted to show you on this slide here. So right now, we are at 62.3% for the labor force participation rate. Prior to the pandemic, we were at 63.4%. So that difference works out to about 2.5 million people that have basically taken themselves out of the labor market. And what they're doing is they're saying, I'm just not looking for work anymore. I'm not working and I'm not looking for work. So we have this big group of people that are just no longer in that pool. And there are many reasons why. So one of the big reasons is that a lot of people have retired because of the pandemic. That's the major cause of that. Another one is we have people that have been looking at childcare costs, and they've decided that it's just too expensive, so they're just going to stay home and take care of their kids. And then others have saved up a lot of money, so they don't need to enter the labor force at this point. So there are many reasons and dynamics going on, but what it ultimately means is that for companies, it's a very hard time to find people right now. And then if you do find somebody, you're having to pay up extra to get them to come work for you. So that wage increase, that wage inflation is just one type of inflation that we're seeing, and it's significant. The other type of inflation that we're seeing right now in the marketplace has to do with goods and services. And so that's what this graph right here is showing. And so this represents the overall US inflation number. It's a very popular number to be looking at. It's the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI. And I took this one back all the way to 1980. And I did that just so we could see how long it has been since the last time we saw these types of levels. The most recent number that we had was for January. The February number gets announced later this week, but the most recent number that we have right now is 7.5% for January. You have to go all the way back to early 1982 before you see numbers like that. So interestingly, the Fed, when we started seeing inflation go up, the Fed thought that that was all temporary. They understood the dynamics of what was going on with supply chain issues and everything, but they just thought that was temporary. So they reiterated that they thought inflation was transitory. Well, they have since capitulated, and they are now recognizing and admitting that they were wrong, but they're recognizing that they need to now react to inflation because it's no longer temporary in their minds. So this is something that we're watching very closely. Incidentally, though, even though the Fed is saying that they think, or they've admitted that it's not temporary, they are still projecting and thinking that inflation will come down pretty substantially by the end of the year. So they're right now projecting that inflation is going to be 2.5% by the end of this year. So I think that's probably a little bit aggressive, but that's what they have out there right now. I also listed on the slide the big drivers of inflation. And one of the categories that we have continued to see is the price of used autos. And this is a year-over-year calculation, but used autos from January of this year to January of last year have, in the aggregate, increased by more than 40%. The other categories that you can see here all have to do with oil and gas. And I'm sure everybody's seen it at the pump. We're over $4 and oil has spiked up. This is because of the geopolitical risk that we're seeing right now with Russia and Ukraine. And so, one of the things that I was thinking about when we're talking about the geopolitical risk with Russia is how much exposure in terms of our economy do we have to Russia? And I think the big one to point to is really our exposure to oil. And so what I tried to find out was how much are we actually importing from Russia, and what's, in terms of all of our sources, right? I found this graphic from Credit Suisse. There's a lot going on here. But I think the big takeaway here is on that left side, that's the supply side. On the right side is the demand side. So if you look at the Russian supply on the left, and the red lines represent where they are shipping, or I guess exporting the oil to. That the top right is the US demand. And you can see how small that line is. Well, Russia actually accounts for less than 5% of our total oil imports. And so I think that's probably manageable from our side. We're of course going to see spikes, but I think it's probably manageable from our side if we see more volatility there. But as I'm looking at this, my other takeaway here is that who actually has a lot of exposure? Well, it's the European Union. So I think this is something that we'll have to watch for. If this continues to escalate, I think the European Union is going to have a lot of issue with inflation and with oil pressure. So something to consider. One thing that we're all watching this, we're all trying to figure out what's going on. Well, the Fed is no different. The Fed is watching this, and right now, I think for the near term, the Fed and the markets are in the same place. They're probably thinking that we don't know long term what this is going to be. So I don't think we need to react decisively right now. And so what they are talking about now is they've already indicated that they are going to raise rates next week. prior to the Russia invasion, the markets were really thinking the Fed would probably go 50 basis points. But because of all of that, I think the market has really come back to, okay, it's probably going to be 25 basis points just because there's more uncertainty out there. But ultimately, I think the Fed is recognizing what's going on. They're taking everything we just talked about and they're saying, okay, we need to raise rates. But I think they're also recognizing how far behind the curve they are. And I think this just illustrates how far behind the curve they are. So what I've done here is I've taken a yield curve from the markets prior to the pandemic, and that was September 30, 2019. And then I mapped out where that yield curve, that same yield curve is as of last Friday. And you can see the longer dated maturities in the yield curve actually were higher than we were prior to the pandemic, but the shorter end, you can just see we have that really big gap there. And that's because of the Fed. The Fed controls the front end of the curve. The market controls the back end of the curve. The market moved rates up, telling the Fed, you got to move rates. The Fed kept saying, no, not yet, no, not yet. And that's why we have this type of yield curve. So the Fed, again, is going to be raising 25 basis points. They have forecasted that they're probably going to do 4 rate hikes this year. The market has priced in that they're going to be doing 5 rate hikes, which equates to about 125 basis points. So something to watch for. This is something that we're watching very closely. But overall, I would say that we are expecting rates to continue to move up, probably a little bit more moderately than we were before Russia. And I think we're also going to see a flattening of the curve because you're going to see that front end catch up. So that's all I had at this point. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions or anything at this point.
Let's pick up right where you were there. Explain the difference then to what happens with the market between a 25 and 50 point basis difference.
Well, that's a good question because right now I think the expectations again is that the Fed is going to do 25 basis points. If the Fed actually does 50 basis points, that's going to surprise the market. So if they do 25, I don't think there's going to be much movement in the interest rate curve. We'll probably see a little bit move up. But if they do 50, I think we're going to see a lot of volatility come into the market. So I think you'll probably see a little bit higher rates than what we're seeing if that happens. So, great question. Any other questions?
Is it your perspective that the economy is predicted doing well and going to continue to do well? I drove back from Coldwater Lake last night, it's about 55 miles. And over the past many years, I've monitored the economy by how many trucks are on the road, how many cars are on the road. I recognized last night that this is a Sunday evening. Clearly, people didn't leave Chicago, went east over the weekend because there were very few cars on the toll roads last night. Only 3 cars passed us. We were driving a little above the speed limit. That's a rarity. I perceive that there will be demand destruction much more than what seems to be predicted. Is anybody taking that scenario into account?
And Brett, can you
Try to repeat that? Yeah. I'm going to repeat the last part. So the question, if I understand you correctly, is if the Fed raises too fast, will that cause us to go into recession? That's kind of where I went in my mind. Is that fair?
You can look at it that way.
Okay. So looking at it that way, I think the Fed is very conscious of that. You know, we are in a very interesting time because the Fed can control the demand side of the economy. Meaning if they raise rates, they want to slow demand down. And if they slow demand down, then that should bring inflation down. But that's not the type of inflation we're seeing. We're seeing inflation on the other side, the cost push, right? And so the Fed, I don't know how much impact they will have from a cost push economy. So I think it's going to be interesting as they raise rates, they slow demand down. If prices don't come down, then we could get into what we would call the stagflation type of environment.
Well, I agree with that. I'm talking about demand destruction by the public. You know, it's now more than $4 per gallon, and a lot of people can't afford $4. Driving their cars. Maybe that's an insignificant idea, but it's interesting to see whether the public solves the problem.
Well, it
Pushes us towards
yeah.
recession.
And that would be another factor that affects the consumer is not only if the Fed would raise rates and slow down consumption from higher rates, we're also seeing higher gas prices, right? And that hits the consumer the same way as higher rates. You know, if your mortgage is higher, it's out of your pocketbook. So the Fed is aware of that. And that's why I think that they are probably not going to do 20 or 50 basis points this time. They're only going to do 50 or 25 because they're recognizing that gas prices are so much higher right now and it's hurting the consumer. Good question.
If China goes into Taiwan, and as big as they are in computer chips, have you seen much in terms of like projections about what that would do to American industry?
The short answer is no. That is not necessarily on the radar screens of economists at this point. I think they're all just focused right now on what's happening in Russia and Ukraine from a geopolitical standpoint. If that starts to escalate, I think definitely.
How much better will First Source do with interest rates up 1.25% at the end of the year?
How we can manage both sides of the balance sheet. Because here's what we're seeing. With rates going up and a lot of banks have liquidity, we are seeing competition more than ever before on the loan side. Rates are going up, but banks are keeping their loan rates down. If the Fed raises rates, then it's probably going to happen where customers are going to come to us and say, hey, we want to see higher rates on our deposits. And so if we have that squeeze on both ends of the balance sheet, that can be very detrimental to the bank. Not detrimental, but it will be able to manage through it, but it could impact our earnings. But that's what we have to be disciplined about. That's what we keep having discussions about at the bank internally. And quite honestly, we're going to be watching the competitive landscape for deposits. But if our competitors are not raising rates because they have so much liquidity right now, then more likely than not, we're not going to be reacting too quickly to the Fed raising rates. And since we continue to have so much liquidity, we still have about $300 million in cash right now. We would like to lend that out. And so I think we're going to be more aggressive on the loan side. So that's our intention. Whether or not all that plays out, there are so many moving factors.
Right, thanks a lot.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
And I'm sure Brett will hang around for a few minutes if anyone has any other questions, but I find that fascinating. And I also find it fascinating how Larry is talking about the economy. I think you should do a podcast, like Dr. Knight's traffic report, and have it be just, about the economy. I like that. That's good. But that's the sort of thing, though, that we think about. Boy, I wonder myself, and I don't know if I'm the only one thinking about gas prices. A lot of you know, we drive a lot, we go somewhere, and it's even for me, you know, starting to think about what that does. But there's a lot of reasons. There's just a lot of reasons for those gas prices to go up. We'll see. But only 5%. We think less than 5% of our oil comes from Russia. So if today Congress says stop, pretty small impact in reality, but the perceived value could be gigantic. Someone's going to make a lot of money at their gas station. I like how this is going. Okay. Thanks so much, Brett, for coming. I don't know if you're aware, but this club, the ELKR Rotary Club, founded Wellfield Botanic Gardens back in 2005. And we have a gift for you, a couple passes to come back. Have you ever been to Wellfield before? Well, please, you can call me up, and I would be happy to give you a tour at some point. And if you make it over here, make it to Elkhart, and the weather's a little nicer, coming over to visit Bill at one of the banks here, you know, just give me a call. I'd love to show you around. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Brett. That was fascinating. Some of those charts were good, and I'm not sure how I compare with that at Wellfield. There's some sort of the rate of growth on the daffodils. Maybe it's coming. It's all coming right now. Thanks, everyone. Look for an email from me. We'll get that link on the Ukraine support out there to everyone. Make sure you let us know how you feel about the possibility of going back to buffet and the cost that's gonna bear on all of us. And have a great rest of your week. I appreciate all of you. Be safe with the weather this week, and have a wonderful week and serve our community. Thank you.